Big up to everybody who's came in. Sorry about that. I had to go use quick bathroom break in between. But yeah, let's get into it, man. A lot to talk about for the Serie A. Didn't really get into it as much as I wanted to um, last live stream when we were going through it, but we'll get into it now. Obviously, massive results across the board. Inter Milan with a big 5-2 victory over Rome to put them 7 points clear of Napoli, who jumped AC Milan to go into second place. And the question that everybody's asking is, can Napoli dream about a title race? If you look at last year, we're at the same point tally as we were trying to chase down Inter. The only difference is Inter Milan is not in the Champions League to take some games away and add more pressure and more tired legs. So, once again, the Serie A is the most interesting league when it comes towards the tail end of the year because you just don't know what's going on. But we're going to go through it. We'll start at the top of the table. Obviously, Inter 72 points, Napoli 65, Milan 63, Como 58. However, the big win by Juventus has now only put them 1 point behind Como, with Como drawing their last game, and is now getting a major push. As we've heard earlier today that Juventus has done a contract extension for Luciano Spalletti, which is a very interesting decision by Juventus because they were linked with a possible Conte return after this situation with Napoli. But yeah, so Juve, Como, all trying, Roma, Atalanta, it's all up for grabs in the first four. Obviously, the first three, Milan is 5 points clear of Como, 6 points clear of Juve. I don't think Napoli or Milan will drop out of the top three. Inter, 7 points clear at Napoli with 7 games left. Anything is possible. However, I just don't see it. I think the fact that Inter, there's only a possibility of Inter playing one extra game, and that would be the Coppa Italia final. So I don't really think that means anything. However, Inter is a very tough game away to Como this Sunday. And if Como was able to pull off a draw against Inter Milan, I think there is a possibility that if you're a Napoli fan, you can dream of possibly chasing down Inter again and Inter bottling it. However, we have a very tough game against a team that always gives us problems every year, and that is Parma, and we're away to Parma. So I would not be sitting here and telling you that I'm too confident. Parma always is a thorn in the side of Napoli. They always can grind out a draw against us. With the way we've been playing very blue collar under Conte with this 3-4-3 that he's tried to force down our throats, not trying to play the 4-5-1 anymore, or even the 4-4-2 diamond midfield that he tried a couple games. But overall, the situation is that if Inter draw to Como and Napoli win and we come within 5 points of them, or even if they lose and we come within 4 points of them, then I could say that the title race is definitely on. We both play similar teams to end the season. We both have to play Parma. We both have to play Lazio. Napoli still has to play Como as well. We both have to play Bologna. So there are tough games ahead for other teams fighting for different positions, other teams trying to get out of the relegation zone, other teams fighting for Europe or trying to fight for Europe. So for me, it's just getting wild here in the Serie A right now. But with Inter, the only thing that I can say that could maybe I could maybe see a situation where Inter bottles this league is if there is more drama behind the scenes like there was last year. For those who don't know, Simone Inzaghi was already in conversation of leaving Inter a month before the Champions League final. There was talks that Al Hilal had already talked to him, that Al Hilal had already reached out and started talking about contracts with him 2 months prior to the final. And then pretty much it was exposed in the offseason that everybody at Inter knew that he was leaving a month in advance. And you saw what happened. I mean, it's an older team. It's an older team that was trying to just keep pushing, and they couldn't. They fell apart, I think, just being so tired with the amount of extra minutes that team has played at the overall age that they are. I think just caught up to them last year with the amount of games and everything else. And when you look at the situation big up Toronto Gunner. when you look at the situation now, they don't have as many games running up. Like I said, the only extra game that Inter could potentially play is the Coppa Italia final, which I don't think is going to be as big on them as it was with the Champions League, especially when you look at the time of everything, because they had 2 games against Bayern. They had 2 games against Barcelona, which those games took a lot out of Inter, which I think definitely helped. As far as on the flip side of it, listen, anything is possible with Napoli. The only thing that makes it difficult to see it happening is I don't see consistent scoring from Napoli. The fact that we're trying to do this without Romelu Lukaku, despite what everybody wants to say, Lukaku had a massive, massive point of our team last year. I mean, 24 goal contributions in general, 14 goals, 10 assists. You don't really have that anymore. Højlund is not going to bag goals like that for me towards the end of this season unless we catch Højlund on a hot streak. I just don't see it happening for me. And at the end of the day, it's hard to see that actually happening. Kevin De Bruyne has looked okay, but it's not really been what we thought we could potentially get with De Bruyne, although I made very clear at the beginning of the season that I was not a fan of the signing of De Bruyne, if I'm being quite honest with you. The constant injuries and stuff that he's had in the last few years showed its ugly head again for Napoli this season. And it shows that these guys messed up with this tremendously, and why now we're hearing all these rumors about Conte leaving Napoli to go back to the national team. He wants out of Napoli with all this other stuff going on and blah, 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 and all the other nonsense that Conte's starting to kick up towards the tail end of the season. Listen, at the end of the day, if Napoli was able to pull it out and we went on to win the Scudetto and we won back-to-back, I mean, as much as I said that Conte, that I want Conte out of the club because of how he's handled this entire situation, the amazing thing would be is that even with me wanting Conte out with how he's handled this, Conte could be argued as the greatest Napoli manager of all time if he won back-to-back Scudettos, just because we've never done it before. And the fact that he would be able to pull it off the same way, chasing down Inter at the tail end of the season, would be absolutely amazing. So for me, Conte, while I still want him to leave at the end of the season, I don't want him at the national team, and we will get into that later on in the show. But I just feel that if Conte comes in and wins back-to-back Scudettos, you say thank you, you step away, and then you figure out what you're going to do with the team. I don't really know if Conte staying on for a third season would be smart, because I don't know how much more we would have to feed him as far as possible dead transfers. I mean, at the end of the day, one of the problems is that we have signed some players that he wanted to try to guarantee him to win, and I just don't think it's worked out. Lukaku, there was talk that he wanted to leave, that he already was talking about leaving starting at the beginning of this season. You're already seeing it play out now with him not reporting for training. It sounds as if Lukaku is not going to play in a Napoli jersey anymore. For those who don't know, Romelu Lukaku's father passed away recently, and it was made known in Italy that Lukaku was thinking about wanting to go back to RSC Anderlecht, to go back to Belgium, to be close with his family. It does seem that the loss of his father has taken a massive toll on Romelu Lukaku. And again, as I've said in different streams, everybody grieves differently. So I'm not too upset that he's talking about leaving to go back. I'm a little bit upset, however, that he has not come back to talk about the entire situation, or just come back to see out the season with Napoli. So, it is what it is with that. De Bruyne, listen, if De Bruyne comes in and helps us win the Scudetto, I'll be absolutely thankful. But at the same time, you can leave the club as well. I'm sorry, man. You're 35, going to be 36 next year. 220,000 euros a week to you is absolutely insane money when you consider the size of a club Napoli is. He doesn't deserve to be there getting that much money, especially when you consider he's barely played a full season in the last few years, even with City. when you consider all of the injuries that he's had to his legs and everything else. So for me, I'm not quite sure if I want to take a chance on him again. So, it's a sad situation because everybody wanted him to succeed, especially if you're a Napoli fan. We all wanted De Bruyne to succeed. However, I just don't think that, he can't, even with the Serie A being the old men league, he's not even being able to do that. So I just think that it's a situation where we have to let him go. Politano's the same thing. We have a lot of changes that we have to go through this season. So, and going into next, there's a lot of questions that we need to ask ourselves as well. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. You got to do what's best for the club. When you look at this situation now, Milan is also entwined in this because as we've seen throughout, the amazing thing here with what's going on is the fact of the matter is that we have a situation with that we could see a huge carousel of coaches in the Serie A this season. There's talk that Massimiliano Allegri has been linked to the national team. There's talk that Antonio Conte is linked to the national team. So we don't know what the situation is with Conte if he's going to stay at Napoli. Me personally, I think Conte will end up walking at the end of the season, whether we win or not, just so that he leaves on a high and maintains a high stock for himself. Listen, there's plenty of young managers to get into to talk about for a situation to maybe get hired on at Napoli. But the big question is, what do we see potentially from Como? Does the Como project come to an end here? Because there's been rumors that Cesc Fabregas may leave to go to a bigger club in Italy, if not a bigger club abroad from Italy, which we have to stand up and give a standing ovation to Cesc Fabregas. What he's been able to do with this Como team has been absolutely unbelievable. The football they play has been absolutely fantastic. And him getting the best out of players like Nico Paz, but other players as well that have been kind of forgotten talents from where they've come from. When you look at the likes of a Maxence Kekere, when you look at the German winger, Nicolas Cunha, he's been able to get the best out of these young talents, and he's really doing a great job at Como. And if he was able to get Champions League in the amount of time that he's been there, I think would be absolutely fantastic. Now, that being said, I would not hire Cesc to come to Napoli, in my personal opinion. I think that when we consider the situation with Cesc Fabregas, I think Cesc needs to go to a mid-level team before he goes to a big club, in my personal opinion. There's been talk of the fact that Cesc could potentially end up at Inter or Milan. I think the only way Cesc Fabregas ends up at Inter is if Inter bottles it. I think my personal opinion is I think Inter wants Christian Kivu to get over the line this year, and then whatever happens next year happens. So then they could eventually make room for Diego Simeone, because Simeone has said multiple times he would love to return to Italy as a manager and be able to coach Inter Milan. Big up DJB. Big up DJB every time. For those who are not subscribed, go over and subscribe to DJB. He is the frickin' man, talks nothing but facts when it comes to Arsenal. But yeah, I think it's an interesting summer coming up in Italy, because we have so much stuff going on with who ends up finishing where, who makes Europe and who doesn't, who potentially has to sell players. There's so much stuff going on in Italy right now. It's absolutely insane. Napoli, as I said, Napoli right now, their destiny's in their own hands to see where it is. As long as we finish second, that's the main thing. Slot, absolutely not. I wouldn't even waste my time with Slot at Napoli. Wouldn't even waste my time with him. Slot for me needs to go and find himself at another club, or maybe take a year off. I would not risk Arne Slot at Napoli. I just don't think he would fit in well with the players that we have. And I don't know if Slot would be able to handle the pressure from the fans, especially at the fact that Napoli has a very big decision to make this summer, and I don't think Slot is a manager who could come in on either end of the way that we have to look at things. If Conte does actually leave, which I'm 90% sure Conte leaves at the end of this year because he doesn't want to risk, his name or his stock going further down. The fact that he came to Italy, got Napoli to win another Scudetto, potentially could win back-to-back. Conte's stock rises back to where he should be looked at by other big clubs. Whether you like his brand of football or not, the thing is, at the end of the day, is Conte went to Napoli when his stock was low after what happened with Tottenham, and he had to take a chance at Napoli. He won. And even if he doesn't win, the fact of that he would get second place with Napoli this season would still be good enough. His stock would still drop because of the fact that the situation at Napoli is down to him. He requested the players that have not showed up this season. He's made questionable decisions, sending players out on loan, like the Noah Long situation. So Conte, for me, I think we have to wait and see what the situation is with Conte. Obviously there's talk of him going to the national team. That's surfaced. But do I think he stays at Napoli? No. I think if anything, he either goes to the national team or takes a sabbatical. But Slot, Napoli's in a position right now with the club where you have to make a very calculated decision. You have to make a decision of either, if you come in second place, do you go out and hire a manager that is simply going to be a man manager, get everybody up on their toes, you make a couple of changes here and there to the team, and you go back again and try to go and win the Scudetto next year? Or do you hit the emergency button, sell players so that you can earn a profit and start a new cycle of players? Zambo Anguissa, Lobotka, and are two players that could potentially leave Napoli. There's also the same thing could be said for Politano. Amir Rahmani as well falls into that conversation. There even could be a conversation to be had about what happens with Giovanni Di Lorenzo, or even what happens with Gutierrez, the left back that we got from Girona. There's a lot of things that are up in the air right now with the squad for Napoli. Even the situation with Scott McTominay. There's been talk that English teams want to come back and spend money with Napoli to get McTominay. I mean, there's been rumors from what I've seen from DiMarzio that McTominay could be going for 50 million, which would be a shocker that somebody would spend 50 million on Scott McTominay. But hey, if you're going to bring the 50 million euros to buy Scott McTominay, I'm all for it, because again, it's for the long-term betterment of the club. And I trust De Laurentiis, Giovanni Mana, and everybody at the boardroom level, because what they've done with the club has been nothing short of spectacular. So the bigger question at the end of the day is, what do you decide to do? For me, I think that absolutely not. I would not take Arteta wouldn't be able to make it at Napoli assembled. He wouldn't make it at Napoli. That whole 6 years, we need a process and all that. We don't have the money to give to you. And he's not doing man management skills. I know that for a fact with the way that he's done at Arsenal. So I do not think that Mr. Arteta would be able to work out at Napoli at all. Look at all the legends in here. Big up Benji, big up Jamboy, big up the Assembled, big up Gunnar SC, Martin Tat. All the legends are in the house. Appreciate everybody. Quadja, appreciate everybody stopping by for the conversation. But yeah, I mean, the thing is that not for me, for Napoli, there's a select few of managers that I would be willing to look at. Conte, big up Jim Bob. Conte, listen, if Conte leaves, like I said, it's where do you go? What direction do you want to look at? If you want to say, you know what, we're going to move maybe 2-3 guys, maintain the team and run it back again next year to try to win another Scudetto and try to go 3 for 5 if we don't win this year, then for me, the main guy I'm calling is Roberto Mancini. Again, as I've said, Mancini, will come in. He will play an attractive brand of football, which is what this team is suited for anyways. I know Conte has tried to go down this defensive route in with Napoli, with the injuries and everything else. We don't look the same. We don't look as cohesive. I just don't like this 3-4-3 that he's been trying to play. It's been a Band-Aid the whole year. And really, at the end of the day, I just could not give a shit if Conte stayed or left at this point, because I don't think he suits the team with the way he wants to go defensively. We saw it last season when he started off defensive, it wasn't working, and he was forced to play a more attractive brand of football, which fits the squad that we have, and we ended up winning the Scudetto. But then you see this season, a couple injuries, he tries to go defensive and it doesn't work, which is why I'm more than happy to, if Conte was to win the Scudetto, listen, I don't really know if I want you to stay, because I don't want you to try this defensive crap again, because another full season of this without other players and without strengthening, we wouldn't be able to get by. And then you have to worry about long-term if we find ourselves in a top 4 battle, which is something we don't need right now. For Napoli, top 4 is mandatory every single season right now with what we're trying to do and accomplish as a club and continue the climbing of getting bigger and bigger overall as a club. So for me, if you're trying to make a quick pivot, Roberto Mancini is on the top of the list for me for that, if you're going to take a quick pivot. The only other person that I would entertain for a quick pivot to try to run it back is Allegri, if Allegri leaves Milan, if there's a potential fallout. But after that, the situation is that we're in a scenario where we have to choose one or the two. Now, if we go down the line of looking long term, we're getting a manager, we're going to rotate and sell some players, we're going to bring in a new cycle of players into the team, then you start coming up with more names. Now, obviously, I said in another stream that Roberto De Zerbi would be somebody that I would look at for if you're going to bring in youngsters and you want to look long term. I would look at him. To a lesser degree, there is Vincenzo Italiano, but I just feel like there's a better manager outside of Italiano. Depending on what Turkey does in the World Cup, I may be interested in Vincenzo Montella. There's Montella, there's Italiano. I would also look at Rafael Palladino. At the end of the day, at Atalanta, what he's done with Atalanta this season alone would convince me to try to hire him. But I don't want to see a back line of 3 with this team right now, unless we're going to revamp our back line. So at the end of the day, I don't really know if I would go with Palladino with that, just because of the back line of 3. Listen, if he walked away from Villa, which is the rumor, since we got this coming in, and Bologna didn't get hammered. Villa kind of got lucky in that game. Bologna was giving them a lot of smoke. I honestly feel that if he was, big up J Lux, big up my guy J Lux every time. If he was up to it, I would entertain Unai Emery at Napoli. I would throw my hat in for Unai Emery to try to bring him to Napoli if he leaves Villa. Obviously, the talk at Villa is that there's not enough money. Potentially to keep some of the players, and that is part of the reason why Unai Emery has been talking about leaving. However, I just don't think that if he does leave, we have to throw our hat in for him, because I think Unai Emery, with the squad that we have, would be able to run it back with a couple of tweaks and be able to challenge for the Scudetto. However, at the end of the day, I think Unai Emery would be looking at a bigger team than Napoli if he won the Europa League with Aston Villa. I could definitely see him being the potential replacement for Simeone at Atletico, and even one of the bigger teams in Italy. If Allegri leaves, I could see Unai Emery tossing his hand at AC Milan or even Inter, depending on what happens. But yeah, those are the guys that I would look at. And listen, Unai Emery would be either or. If Napoli could get Unai Emery, I would take him for a couple of years to bring in a new cycle of players and play under him. Or if you wanted to take a pivot and try to go all out and win in the first year with Emery, I would take a chance with him because he is a good manager. But we'll end up seeing what happens. Klopp's too big for Napoli, Harv. Klopp's too big for Napoli. I think if Klopp was to come to Italy, he's destined for one of the big 3. I don't see Jurgen Klopp wanting to come to Napoli. He's put in his time at Liverpool. He's going to have even less money at Napoli than what he had at Liverpool. I don't see him entertaining Napoli to that point, in my personal opinion. I just don't. And there's also been rumors that Klopp is intrigued by the Atletico Madrid job if Diego Simeone leaves. So for me, I just don't think we're that high up on the pecking order for a manager like Klopp to look at Napoli. That's just my personal opinion. I do think, however, Klopp would be suited for an Inter if Inter goes through the changes that we're talking about. But we'll see with what ends up happening, because Inter's got a lot of talk of transfers and resets and possibly a project youth, one could say, at Inter as well, with the rumors that both Barella and Bastoni and DiMarco could all be moving on from Inter this season. Obviously, Bastoni's been heavily connected to Barcelona, as well as there's been loose talks that Bastoni's been looked at by Manchester City and Liverpool. So, and loosely linked with Arsenal as well, but I think a lot less about the Arsenal links. But I just don't think I just don't think that that Klopp would come there. No, I wouldn't take Thiago Motta. I think Thiago Motta got over pushed on that Bologna team. Again, the same thing could be said about Thiago Motta as it was with Calafiori with that team. You took Thiago Motta off the team and you took Calafiori off the team. The difference was 6 points, but they walked away with the Coppa Italia. I'm not too big on Thiago Motta. I think Thiago Motta would be perfect for like Lazio to take over after Sarri, get a couple years there, work with some younger talent and see where he could go with that. But Thiago Motta, for me, I don't think is good enough for any of the big clubs, for that matter, in the Serie A. I don't think Motta's not going to get the Rome job just yet. Gasperini, they're going to give him another season. They always do at Rome. Napoli, I would not risk a year to miss out on the top four for possibly Europa League to take a chance on Motta. I wouldn't. I think there's other managers that have done more with less than Thiago Motta. So for me, Thiago Motta is not somebody that I would even entertain at Napoli, to be quite honest with you. That's just my personal opinion. Do you think Maxence Kekere would be able to thrive in the Prem? I think he could. I think he'd be one of those players that would need, possibly a full season to adjust. I don't know if he would hit the ground running immediately, but you never know. He is a good player. I've liked what I've seen from him at Como under Cesc Fabregas. And I've said I would love Maxence Kekere to be at Napoli. He'll be 26 next year. You can sign him for a decent long-term contract. I could see him being one of the successors to Lobotka and Anguissa in the midfield for the next rotation or next cycle of players that we're looking at. So I would not mind Maxence Kekere. I think he's a very good player. I've liked him since he was promoted as a teenager up at Lyon. So he's a very good player. I like Kekere a lot and would love to have him at Napoli. When we go down the table and you look at this top four race right now in Italy, AC Milan did not play well against Napoli. It really wasn't a great game, if we're being honest. It was a cagey game. It was a very big tactical game that was all based on where, who was going to take more of the advantage or try to go for it. AC Milan did not. Napoli did. Napoli ended up getting the goal off of Matteo Politano, and I think that game has really showed what AC Milan has been this year. I mean, 9 draws, 4 losses. They just haven't been consistent, and the big worry for AC Milan is you have talks that Christian Pulisic will leave, even though he has not had a good season this year. He's been well off the mark from where he was last season. But, again, Massimiliano Allegri, the fact that you try to make Christian Pulisic and Rafael Leao as your strike partnership up top in a 3-5-2 for me doesn't make any sense, if I'm being quite honest with you. Big up to the legend, Shane Gooner. Anybody who hasn't liked or subscribed, please go like and subscribe to Shane. He's an absolute legend. one of the best out here on YouTube. In my personal opinion, he's got the best show on YouTube when it's off topic. Love talking football history with him, Kenny Ken, Taryn, DJB, and sometimes when he hops on, and of course the Godfather Jez as well. So always go and like and subscribe and support Shane. He is the fucking man. But his future stars in FIFA 22. Yeah, you could say that. But Pulisic, listen, Pulisic has fallen off this season. I don't know if there's an injury or anything that's been bothering him that's caused the fall off, but I think it's also the fact that he's much better in a number 10 position than he is playing as a secondary striker, especially when the other striker he's playing with is a very inconsistent Rafael Leao. Milan has a lot of things that they have to tend to, which is going to be interesting to see how this season ends, because AC Milan cannot afford to fall out of the Champions League this season and need to hold on to their spot. And when you look at the rest of the clubs, Como, listen, if Como makes top 4, it's an absolute disgrace for the other teams, because Como has been a big project when you look at it in these last 4 years. And the fact that these teams have been able to out-scout and really with Cesc Fabregas as well, out-coach some of these other teams in this fast of a situation, I think is very, very interesting. At the end of the day, there is a questionable thing going on with Como because of the fact that, there's all this talk nowadays with ownership about clean money and all this stuff. Como's getting a lot of questionable money pumped into them to see what they've been doing. But the fact that they were promoted in the 23-24 season from Serie B into Serie A, and the fact that they're already running from, just coming up to finishing 10th last season to now fighting for top 4 is absolutely insanity. And you have to tip your hat to Cesc Fabregas with what he's done with the team, even though you could question some of the money that's being pumped into the team. But for a storyline about the Serie A, it's absolutely fantastic to see one of the smaller teams like Como be able to punch above their weight limit and do what they're doing right now. I honestly hope Como does make it, just because it'd be awesome to see Juventus get hurt financially again by them not making the Champions League. But then you have the interesting question that everybody's floating around. Does Cesc Fabregas stay at Como? Listen, I think Cesc stays another season. However, I would not be shocked if he left, because of the fact that Nico Paz going back to Real Madrid could affect Como going forward. He has been by far the standout player for this season. He's been their standout player for the last 2 seasons, if I'm being quite honest with you. He's a massive talent. I think he's going to do very well at Real Madrid. My question is, him going back for the cheap amount of money that he is, even if they get Champions League, the question is, who are you going to go after that's really going to fill that role for Nico Paz? And I think that's something that Cesc Fabregas is going to take under consideration if he stays at Como or not. Now, like I said, I don't know if one of the big teams comes calling for Fabregas in Italy. I could see maybe one of the other slightly bigger teams in a different league come calling for Cesc. And at the same time, I don't know if Cesc wants to leave Como just yet. Como is a fantastic building block for him to potentially do well with. I mean, he's still in a semifinal for the Coppa Italia against Inter, which, if he won the Coppa Italia and got Champions League for Como, would be absolutely massive. And then with everything that would be going on for Como, then I think it would be hard for him to walk away. But at the same time, he could use that as leverage to try and leave. I could see Grosso taking over for Como if Cesc left. He has done a good job at Sassuolo. However, Sassuolo should have never got relegated. That was all self-inflicted with them. They should have never rushed Domenico Berardi back the way that they did. His injury is what really caused them to go down when he got injured, as well as Armand Loriente. But Grosso, I think, could definitely do a decent job at Como if Cesc left. Listen, Cesc, me personally, unless you're going to get the Inter job and you're going to have a massive role with Bet Marotta as far as picking players, especially youth players, I think Inter's the only job for you to go to. AC Milan is a mess. You may not have Rafael Leao or Christian Pulisic coming into next season. Jimenez has been a shit striker and a shit signing. Fulkrug, I don't even know why they wasted money on Fulkrug. You were better off getting Castellanos before he went to West Ham to be a striker for you because he's played better in the Serie A than what he's done in the Premier League. I honestly don't think it's a smart move for him to go to AC Milan. I know Zlatan Ibrahimovic is talking a lot now that he's part of the guys running it, but I don't see it working out for Cesc. And I think Cesc needs to stay at Como or jump immediately to Inter if the job is there for him. Because of the fact that I think if he went to Inter and it didn't work out for a season, it doesn't hurt your stock as much as what it could potentially do with AC Milan, depending on who comes and who goes for Milan. I mean, there's so many players that Milan could be losing. There's talk that Fikayo Tomori could be leaving. There's talk that Matteo Gabbia could be going across the city to Inter to be the replacement for Bastoni. Pavlovic has been linked with the move away. Salasmakers is linked with the move away. As I said, Pulisic and Leao are linked with moves away. Palestra and Biraghi and I forget I mess his name up all the time. The young Italian left back for Milan. They're all the players that have been a part of the 11. Rabiot. Nobody is safe at AC Milan right now because of the financial troubles that they're having. They're going to need a manager for a long term, which Fabregas I think does suit well for long term. But for Fabregas, I don't know if you want to trust that front office of AC Milan. They took a team that was a continual Champions League team and completely went by the wayside with it and fell to ninth in their first year taking over. Yes, they look better. A lot of that has to do with Massimo Allegri. But if Allegri's leaving, if a manager at the level of Allegri is leaving, I would take that into consideration with where possibly AC Milan's going. Bartasaghi. Bartasaghi and Palestra, if you keep him, is good. But again, he doesn't play a 3-5-2. He's going to want to play a 4-2-3-1. And I think that puts a big question mark on AC Milan with how they would want to go about change if they went for him. Plus, again, as well as he's done at Como, there's other managers in Italy as well that are very, very good. So, for me, Cesc, I would stay at Como for one more year. If you once you lose Nico Paz, pick out a number 10 that would work. Obviously, well, not obviously, but there is heavy talk that Lorenzo Pellegrini is leaving Rome at the end of this year, which would be sad, but that's that hard-headed greaseball shit that you see from Gasperini. And listen, if you lose Nico Paz, I would be interested if you went out and looked at Lorenzo Pellegrini. I know I want Napoli to sign him, especially if we're going to do a pivot and push for a Scudetto once again next year. But for me, I think Cesc should stay at Como. I think Cesc should stay at Como, get some experience in Europe with them and everything else before you just immediately jump ship and try to go to one of the bigger teams. You look at the rest of the teams with where we're at in Italy right now with where the table is. I mean, Juventus, the thing about Juventus is not even a good project to look at anymore. I mean, they're talking about re-signing but knocking his wages down in Vlahovic, which is absolutely ridiculous because the two other bums they've signed in Jonathan David and Openda have been absolutely garbage this year. They're talking about extending Vlahovic when he's done nothing once again this season. He's one of the most overrated strikers in Europe, if I'm being quite honest with you. And at the end of the day, I mean, he's only played 14 games in the Serie A, and I think he's only scored like 3 or 4 goals. I mean, it's the thing is with me, and listen, I'm a Napoli fan, so I hope nothing but the worst for Juventus. But for me, them going to get Luciano Spalletti means they're trying to play a more offensive brand of football. However, they're not doing anything to help this man or help this team. I mean, the two bright spots with Juve is Yildiz and Chico Conceição, and maybe the right thing is that now that you got Spalletti, you got Locatelli's form has gone up because he's playing his actual proper position rather than just being a holding six. He's being more of the number 8 position, which is what got him, a call up to the national team and everything else. So for me, I think he's doing a good job at Juve. He's stabled the ship. He's definitely got them playing better football than that bum Tudor and what Malta was doing with this team. So maybe we'll see. Maybe a full season under Spalletti could get them guaranteed into Champions League next year. Obviously, it's going to go down to the wire with Juve. But you know what? It is what it is. Juve is going to be a very interesting situation because they're going to have to offload players. Maybe Como can finesse somebody from them to go to the team. I just think Juve is in a very precarious position because I would not be shocked if Thuram leaves. I wouldn't be shocked if Locatelli got an offer from a bigger club, if he would bounce. Bremer, who was supposed to be the best defender in Italy, he hasn't been the best defender in Italy since they made that claim when he was at Torino. Do you sell him? There's just a lot of things wrong with Juventus right now. And if Juventus would not qualify for the Champions League, it would be catastrophic for them, particularly in the financial department, because they're going to need to sign players to get this team firing. Koopmeiners has been an absolute disaster since he left Atalanta. The fact that Weston McKennie is one of your best players shows the state that Juventus is in, and there's no guarantee that Yildiz will stay. I think if a big offer comes in for Yildiz, they will have to sell him, especially if they don't make the Champions League, which would hurt them even more. So we'll see with what ends up happening as far as them. But like I was saying with Cesc, Juve, he's not going to go there because of Spalletti, but it's such a dead club right now with the decisions that they've been making. I just don't see why he would look at it. Madrid has already activated the buyback clause, Toronto Gunnar. They activated the buyback clause in January. He's already agreed to it. We're not going to be able to get involved. I'll be honest with you. If I was Napoli and I'm looking at anybody from Madrid, I would be questioning how much the cost would be for Arda Güler, because I think Güler could fit in very well with Napoli if you get a more offensive-minded coach. I would really like that, to be honest with you. Do we do the right thing dodging him? For Vlahovic, Vlahovic sucks. Arsenal did tremendous by dodging Vlahovic. He's garbage. Vlahovic is not a good striker. He's either hot for 2 months and he's the best striker on the planet for 2 months, and then he goes cold for the rest of the season, or it's an injury-prone season and he chips in goals here and there. He's not that good of a striker. He's very overhyped. That's why Juventus is trying to negotiate his contract down. Spalletti's a decent manager. Spalletti's, before he won with Napoli, he was known as the bridesmaid, never the bride. Listen, he's a good manager. He's going to play you more offensive-minded football. He's going to stabilize your team. He's a manager that normally can consistently get you into the top 4 in Italy. We saw that at Inter when he took over Inter Milan, when Inter was an absolute shit show after they sacked Roberto Mancini. The second time. So I do think he was good. I do think Spalletti's a good manager. Do I think Spalletti's a better manager than Cesc? Yes. Right now I do, because he's got more credit in the bank than Cesc. But if he doesn't get Juventus into the Champions League, I think Spalletti will be on a very short leash in this upcoming season, because Juventus has so much financial problems. They can't afford to miss Champions League. And it would be a serious crippling effect on them. Same could go for the other team. Big up to Shane Gunnar, my guy. But Rome, man, it's just the same old thing with Rome. They look good for half the season, second half of the season. At different times, they crumble. Gasparini has made it a point. Lorenzo Pellegrini will not have a spot in this team. That's why there's talk of him looking elsewhere. Dovbyk, for some reason, will not have a spot in his team. It came out, I think, 2 days ago that Roma has all the intent in the world to make Daniel Malin a permanent signing from Aston Villa, and that they will be selling Dovbyk in the offseason. Why? I don't know, but that's Gasperini for you. For me, if Rome is being serious and they're going to sell Dovbyk, as a Napoli fan, I would love to get Dovbyk off their hands. I just don't think that Dovbyk has been used properly. I think in the way, like I said, if you looked at a Roberto Mancini or a Vincenzo Italiano or possibly even a Rafa Palladino or even Vincenzo Montella, or like I said, the reach is Unai Emery. Any of those managers would get Dovbyk firing again in the Serie A and play a competent brand of football where he works. I don't see why he's getting rid of him, but Gasperini is known to do this. He's had fallouts with players all the time at Atalanta. He did the same with Papu Gomez. He did the same with the Slovenian striker Josip Ilicic. So, it is what it is. I personally would take both of those players off Rome. If Lorenzo Pellegrini is going to be a free signing, I take him in a heartbeat for Napoli. He would complement so well in that midfield if you're going to do a pivot and try to run it back for the Scudetto next season. For you to have a midfield that consists of Stanislav Lobotka, Zambo Anguissa, Scott McTominay, and then to have the likes of Lorenzo Pellegrini coming off the bench would be a fantastic player to have. And again, if you're going to play a 4-2-3-1, to have Dovbyk and McTominay as your middle two. McTominay is the 10 and Dovbyk is the striker. When you look at some of the wingers that we're linked to, especially at the fact that Noah Lang, it doesn't sound like Galatasaray is going to make it a permanent purchase. Well, we still will see. That's still up in the air. But the fact that Noah Lang could be coming back, David Neres, we need to move on from. But I think Dovbyk and Napoli would be very good. Listen, Conte, I don't think stays. I don't think Conte stays even to see Dovbyk. But Conte with Dovbyk would be a very good pairing in my personal opinion, because Dovbyk is very good on the ball, and he's a goal scorer, and I think he would work out well. But I think he would work well with any of those managers that I said. Like, I think if you got Roberto Mancini in, to have a Mancini and McTominay with Noah Lang on the left and a possibility of Noah Lang's current teammate who has been linked to Napoli, which is Yunus Akın, and as well the other Turkish winger in Akturkoglu, have both been loosely linked with Napoli. I think if you're looking at from an attacking point of view, that's a very good attack that could come. There's also loose rumors that we could be looking at Bologna's Riccardo Orsolini, and maybe even for a push for the Scudetto. Loose talks about Armand Loriente from Sassuolo and Domenico Berardi, which I think all those guys fit in with an attack-minded team. I think is very, very good. But like I said, Rome, it's just the same old thing with Rome. They look good. They look like they're going to make Champions League, which will help them get over the hump with their financial problems. And then all of a sudden, they absolutely fall apart. I mean, they had the best defense in Italy for a time being, and then they absolutely fell apart. I mean, they have 11 losses. They have the most losses out of the top 7 teams right now in Italy. The only team that has more losses than them, when you look at the top half, is Bologna. Even Lazio has less losses than them, and Lazio has strip mined that team under the nose of Maurizio Sarri. So for me, I think that it's an absolute travesty what has happened to Rome. I was hoping that at least them, even though I don't like them and they're our rival, I'd rather them in the top 4 than Juve. But Como does it well for me to get both of them out of there. But listen, Rome's going to go under some major facelift with the Friedkin ownership. I'm not quite sure if Gasperini's the right guy for Rome, in my personal opinion. I think what Gasperini had at Atalanta worked because of how much smaller of a club Atalanta is. Rome, that fan base is going to go after Gasperini next season if they force out their captain, if they force out the captain and Dovbyk and they bring in some new players and they're not attacking well. I mean, listen, Daniel Malin has done well in Serie A, but I do not think I do not think Daniel Malin's going to be here to stay to be this big time goal scorer for Rome, in my personal opinion. I just don't see it happening. I think Rome is going to need to get serious about signing two other players that fit Gasperini's system in order for them to really make a run at Champions League, or Rome is just going to be condemned and stuck in this Europa League for the time being, as it has been for many, many years with them. Malin's okay. I think he's doing well in Italy because of his pace, and the pace of the Serie A is much slower than the Premier League. But he has been doing okay with Rome. We'll see what ends up happening with him. Like I said, I think Gasperini's been the biggest problem with some of the situations and decisions with the players and everything else. Yeah, they do own both, but my thing is with Everton to Rome, the question for me is where do you go about swapping players and everything else? Now, for me, if I was the Friedkin group, I would not. The question is, like, for instance, you could look at Jack Grealish, for example. Would Jack Grealish, I think Jack Grealish for his career would be better if he went to Rome instead of going to Everton permanently, in my personal opinion. If you're trying to get the best out of both clubs, I would look at Jack Grealish going to Rome, because I think a Grealish and a Malin with a better striker in front of them, with with a Dovbyk in front of them, would be a good front three, especially when you look at in Italy. However, the problem is if Rome doesn't make Champions League financially, they're going to be in trouble again. You know, they want to sign Malin permanently. They're going to have to negotiate his wages down, which doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have money for other positions. And like I said, the fact that your captain, Lorenzo Pellegrini, when you have money problems, you're going to let him walk for free, possibly to a rival like a Napoli or an Inter, I think is absolutely mind-blowing to me. So Rome, they could be shooting themselves in the foot by trying to die by the sword of Gasperini, in my personal opinion. Listen, Dovbyk at Everton would be fire. And hell, I think Lorenzo Pellegrini at Everton could be fire, if I'm being quite honest with you, if you were going to do something like that. Pellegrini, the only thing is he's 30 years old. So you may get 2, maybe 3 years at the most in England out of Pellegrini. Dovbyk is, I think, 28, turning 29 next year. So you could get Dovbyk for 3 to 4 years as a striker. Listen, he's better than Barry or Beto for Everton, and he'd be a good striker, good link up with him and Ndai as well, if they're able to hold on to Ndai. I think the fact that they were able to hold on to, I think it's Dwight McNeil. I think Dwight McNeil, him, Ndai, I think the players around that they have would work well with the Dovbyk, and I could definitely see Dovbyk switching from a Rome to go to Everton. That would definitely be good on. I would think that would definitely be a good shout for Everton, especially if Everton makes the European spots as well. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, Dewsbury Hall works hard, and so does Gardner. I think they're one winger. And they're a striker away from being a decent continual team in the Premier League and on the ascension. The question is do you really trust Jack Grealish to be that winger going forward? Because I think Grealish is turning 31 coming into next season, or at the beginning of next season. So I don't know if Grealish is really the guy to do that. That's why I said I could see Grealish going to Rome and working out if the Friedkins want to do something like that and send Dovbyk back the other way. But listen, Rome overall, if they miss out on the Champions League, once again, it's to the words of the bum, Mikel Arteta, it's fine margins. It's fine margins financially, and I don't really see where Rome goes from here outside of just languishing around where they have been. They brought Gasperini in to be the guy to get them over the hump to make the Champions League, and it just looks like he's going to be another manager in a long list of managers it's not going to happen. For me, I said the Europa League was going to be the best way for them to make the Champions League, in my personal opinion. And, they had to get over Aston Villa. And we all know what happens when you face Unai Emery in the Europa League. 9 times out of 10, you lose. So for me, I think Rome is going to be stuck in this position. I don't particularly think Rome has enough offense going forward to get them to climb out of the Europa League spots. The one thing I do worry, though, is they do have an offense that could flounder and drop them into the Conference League. Now, if they go to the Conference League and Atalanta gets over them, number one, for Atalanta, Rafa Palladino has to be up for the conversation of manager of the year. If Rafa Palladino gets Atalanta into the Europa League spots and he drops Juventus or Rome out of those positions, more likely Rome than Juventus, Rafa Palladino has to be in a shout for manager of the season because he took over Atalanta when they were in 16th place and he's got them up to 7th. Yes, they had the big remontada against Borussia Dortmund, which was fantastic for them financially to get to the next round. And yes, they got smoked by Bayern Munich. But with what he's working with at Atalanta and what he's done with the team, I think Rafa Palladino and Atalanta do not rule them out of possibly pulling an upset and knocking Rome out of the Europa League spot and dumping Rome into the Conference League, which would be absolutely a crisis level for Rome. And I think Gasperini would get sacked if he doesn't qualify for the Europa League, in my personal opinion. The only thing from there that you could hope is that Como's the one to win the Coppa Italia to extend a position to where Rome could then get into the Europa League that way. And then that would mean 8th place Bologna or potentially Lazio could get in. But for me, I don't know. I think Rome's going to be running into a bad situation very soon financially if they don't make the Champions League this season. It's going to be a very interesting thing for them. And the same thing can be said. Listen, like I said, if Como was to win the Coppa Italia, it would give an extra spot in the Europa League for Italy if they won. I do believe. And that would mean it would drop down to allow either Bologna or Lazio to get in the Conference League and Rome would stay in the Europa League. Listen, if Bologna got in from there, Vincenzo Italiano, I think his resume looks even better. If Lazio was to jump over Bologna, when you look at that, if Como was to win the Coppa Italia, I think Lazio, that would be absolutely massive, especially with everything that's going on with Lazio. And you know, Lazio, they don't play Bologna head to head, but Lazio does not have the easiest of runs. And here, Maurizio Sarri is in the Coppa Italia as well. He's against Atalanta on the other leg of the semifinals. And I think that when you consider that there's a possibility that Sarri could win a Coppa Italia with Lazio, listen, if Sarri won a Coppa Italia with Lazio, I think that it would cement Sarri as possibly needing to get a look at one of the bigger clubs as well, either a Milan or a Inter or hell. To be honest with you, with the way he's been handling the Lazio situation with their shit owner Lotito, I personally would not be mad if Sarri came back to Napoli. But for me, that's me as a Napoli fan wanting him to come back to right the wrongs of the 2017-2018 season. Honestly, I would like Sarri to go to the national team for me if he won the Coppa Italia, because it would just be an unbelievable achievement for him, especially his story, to go from a banker into a footballing manager and won what he's won in a short period of time would be very, very impressive for Maurizio Sarri. And I think he's the guy that the national team is desperately calling out for as well. But when you just look at everything, when you look at it at the end of the day, I think Lazio, for me, I don't know if they're going to have enough to get over Bologna for that 8th spot. If Lazio was to win the Coppa Italia, it's a massive achievement for them to do that, to get them into the Europa League. And it would be absolutely disheartening to see them getting into the Europa League. And if Atalanta jumped over Rome, because it would be a catastrophe for Rome if that happened. Lazio, I mean, here's the thing. The ownership is trying to go down this path of getting a new stadium. The same thing with Rome. The two Rome clubs have a lot of financial problems coming away in the future, and it's going to be a big, big situation for the Serie A if the two Rome clubs can straighten out what they're trying to do with two different stadiums and not sharing the Stadio Olimpico anymore. But Lazio, look, The fact that Sarri's got this team where they're at with what the ownership has done, if he wins the Coppa Italia or he somehow gets them into a position where Como wins the Coppa Italia and they get into the Europa Conference League because of it, it would be absolutely massive for that team, for Lotito. The question is he a serious enough manager or serious enough owner to really consider investing in Sarri? I don't think he is. I think Sarri leaves Lazio at the end of the season, if I'm being quite honest with you, and will join that other major conveyor belt for the Italian managers coming into next season. And same thing with Italiano. If Italiano's not going to make the Conference League unless Atalanta or Rome has an absolute meltdown. I don't think it's going to happen. Bologna has some tough run-ins towards the tail end of their season. They have to go away to Juventus. They have to go to Napoli. They have to go to Atalanta, and they end the season against Inter. And they still have to host Rome as well. The only two games that I think are guaranteed wins for Bologna is Cagliari and Lecce. However, the other ones I don't see being a lot between them. I think Bologna might become a punching bag for some of those teams. So I don't really know if Bologna is going to be around there. So there's a great opportunity for Lazio to jump Bologna and try it and hope for either themselves or Como to win the Coppa Italia so that they can get that extra spot. But we will see as far as that. Now to get on to this national team. I'll tell you, this national team, the Italian national team, is the biggest piece of shit federation there is right now, because Malago has done a complete 180. And like I said this on the rant that I did where I did the call-in show. You know, the problem is at the end of the day with the Italian national team is they are not serious about changing. You can already see it. You know, within the first couple days after Italy was knocked out of the World Cup by Bosnia, which big up to Bosnia again for them winning. But when you look at all the talk that was going on about we need wholesale changes and everything else, in a drop of a hat like that, all these fucking content creators, all these other journalists, and all these other fucking hand jobs that are trying to talk about the Italian national team have reverted to type and said that it's okay. You know, now we're going to look at Conte and Allegri. I'm sorry, what the fuck are we doing here? What are we doing here? The 3-5-2 does not fucking work. It does not work for this national team, and you want to look at two managers to potentially play 3-5-2 again after it just fucked us out of another fucking World Cup. The 3-5-2 cost us in 2018. It cost us in 2026. And now you're talking about, with the younger players, we might be able to do it. Brother, what the fuck are we talking about here? Antonio Conte or Allegri should not be looked at within a mile of this fucking national team job. The national team job should be one man and one man only, and that is Roberto Mancini. Big up, Marie. Big up, Marie, every time. Hope all is well with you, Marie. Thank you for stopping by. I just do not understand what we're doing. Like I said, unless the 55 members of the bureaucracy in the Italian Federation are sent out, it's going to be the same old story and same old bullshit with Italy again. We're already talking about Antonio Conte or Allegri is being looked at for the job. Why? What? Big up, Sam. Yeah, we do have to hold that. These fucking Italians get on my goddamn nerves. But at the end of the day, why are we looking at doing the definition of insanity with this shit again? If you go down the route of Antonio Conte, Conte is not good at developing youth. Neither is Allegri. Allegri is the same fucking guy that tried having Federico Chiesa play as a wingback. The fuck are we doing here? Why are we trying to go down the route that has not fucking worked? It just goes to show that the Italian Federation, all the old fucking greaseballs that are running the federation, that are the bureaucrats who vote for the president, are not going to change, and that the Italian Federation is doomed for worse to be worse and worse. The 3-5-2 doesn't work. All these fucking idiots that are talking about, Italy needs to bring back the defensive mentality and this, and this. Brother, Why do we need to do that when we just showed when you put the best team out there and actually play a little bit more offensive football with Mancini, you can go out and win? That's what stopped us from fucking qualifying for the World Cup this time around. You left the offensive players at home. All these other fucking jagoffs came back and was sucking everything out of Gattuso's ass, saying that the team that he sent is good enough. We'll get to the World Cup, blah, blah, blah. We'll do it the Italian way. We'll play defensive. And guess what? We fucked off another World Cup. Marie, Conte is a decent manager for a club. For the national team, he would cause more problems for Italy than do us any benefit. I think Conte needs to stay in club football. I don't want to see him anywhere near the Italian national team job. You know, you got guys like fucking Simon Jordan, and this is no disrespect to Simon Jordan like that, but Simon Jordan has some fucking jagoff from Italy talking about Conte will do this. Conte ain't going to do nothing of the fucking sort, dickhead. Conte is going to come in. Conte is not good at developing the youth. So all this talk about the youth this and the youth that and blah, 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 none of that's going to fucking happen. Conte is going to come in. He's going to play the same 3-5-2 that he played with Italy in the Euros in 2016. And then he's going to get hot. And then he's going to go, he'll probably leave. And then we're going to be in another shit show for the fucking World Cup. He should not get the job. Sam, I'll be honest with you. Vincenzo Montella and Mancini are the only two guys I want to see at this national team. Vincenzo Montella and Mancini are the only two guys for me that I would look at seriously for the Italian national team, because they're going to play a more forward-thinking brand of football with Italy. And when we played a forward-thinking brand of football under Mancini, when he told the federation to go fuck themselves and we're not going to do this the defensive, pragmatic Italian way, we won the fucking Euros. I just don't see what's so hard in seeing this. You left Lorenzo Pellegrini off, who's an offensive player. You left Domenico Berardi off the team, even though he's been tearing shit up back with Bologna since coming back from the MLS. But Bernardeschi would have been a better option to get called back to the team. And you left off Riccardo Orsolini. The only two guys that Gattuso gets a pass on for not calling is Zaccagni and Di Lorenzo because of the injury. But the sad thing is with Zaccagni, he wasn't going to call him either way. And Zaccagni has been the best left winger in Italy since Insigne left. So at the end of the day, you know, it's the same old shit. It's the same old shit with Italy. The politics are already kicking back in. They're already talking about, even if the next president is Malago, that they're talking about getting some fucking morons in Allegri and Conte to come back and do the Italian way again. We're going to try to play defense again when it hasn't worked. It hasn't fucking worked, but we're going to try it one more time just because we got youngsters. I mean, this is the shit that doesn't make any sense. You got guys that are out here trying to make a fucking argument. Oh, Gattuso would have went through if he had brought Coyote. Huh? In a 3-5-2, the winger has to be able to score goals and be proactive in playing offense. Coyote don't do none of that. He's a good defensive right back. Yes, he can get up the pitch because he has pace, but technically, he's not on that same level as a Di Lorenzo is. He can't score goals like Di Lorenzo can. So why the fuck are we talking about this? Palestra even. Palestra's better going forward than Coyote is. So why are we having this conversation about, oh, we needed him? Brother, you're clutching your straws because, once again, all these fucking dickheads that are these Italian commentators are just falling by the wayside to just do the same old shit over and over again. The 3-5-2, this obsession of the 3-5-2 and wanting to do it the Italian way from the 1990s is what's going to cause us more fucking problems in the long run. Yeah, he's definitely like Arteta on that. The only difference between him and Arteta is Conte's ego is valid because of the amount of fucking trophies he's won. Arteta shouldn't have any ego because he hasn't won shit yet. Not with his team. But at the end of the... Yeah, he wasn't stupid. Well, it's because of the politics. Again, the biggest problem with Italy is the fucking politics. The politics in Italy, the corruption in Italy is the overall problem with the FA. The FA is giving all these different teams all the problems in the world. They're not trying to allow them to buy the stadiums or get their own stadiums. They still want it to where the team is responsible for the upkeep of the stadium and the greaseballs just sit back and collect money on the rent or the splits that they agree on per each stadium. Again, the only teams that own their own stadium in Italy is Juventus, Sassuolo, and Udine. AC Milan and Inter finally just got through and bought the San Siro. But the San Siro is in shit condition. This is why Italy can't get looked at for hosting any major international tournament. The president of UEFA just came out 2 weeks ago and said the state of the stadiums in Italy are garbage. If Italy doesn't fix up, we are going to get stripped of our co-hosting ability with Turkey for the 2032 Euros. So again, it's the politics. At the end of the day, if the politics don't fix up, nothing's going to change with Italy. And we're going to continue being this laughing stock that we have turned into because they don't want the league to get better. The federation, this is how stupid the whole thing is with the federation. The federation is not allowing the league to get better because the federation in total doesn't want the league to get better, right? The federation wants to do this bullshit where the next marketing agreement that they get for the Serie A, they want 80% of the money to go to Inter, Milan, and Juve, which makes no fucking sense because the best way for the Serie A to get stronger is if you find a marketing agreement where it's an even level playing field for all the teams. If you could get a marketing agreement put in place where every team in the Serie A is getting the same amount of money, it benefits the bigger teams in the long run because now the smaller teams are going to have to get better with their scouting. The smaller teams have more money to get better players in total for their scouting, which now means the bigger teams will be able to look directly in Italy for better talent than constantly going foreign all the time to bring in new players. And it will force more opportunity for the Italian talent to come through if you got more money circulating around the smaller teams. And more money for the smaller teams allows better academies for the rest of these teams to be able to hype up more Italian talent. So at the end of the day, the FA is the biggest problem. And then not only with the marketing money to come in, again, you're not allowing the teams at a better opportunity to own their own stadium. Again, if the Italian teams could own their own stadium outright, you would then see the Serie A do a hard U-turn and actually start ascending to being one of the top leagues again. Right now, I don't know anybody who can make an argument that the Serie A is in the top three. The Bundesliga for me is probably a better league than Serie A is right now. Yes, Inter's made 2 Champions League finals in the last 3 years, but the problem is that overall the stability and how the German clubs are moving have a better opportunity going forward than the Italian teams do. And that's the reason why, for me, it's a massive, massive problem. No, it wasn't. Sam, no, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. I'm sorry. You got bums like Politano. You got a bunch of bums on that fucking team who have never proven anything when the spotlight gets bright. You got Politano, who ain't worth a fuck. Barella shouldn't even have been playing with how tired he was. We played right into the hand. And then you move Bastoni out of his position because you needed to make a political statement by starting Calafiori, who's a dog shit fucking center back in the first place and shouldn't even be on the Italian national team. So, no, Gattuso was the setup of his own demise. He fucked us. And when you play players out of positions in a game that's that big, of that magnitude, mistakes are bound to happen. And the mistakes happened. It was on Gattuso's watch, but it's also not all on Gattuso as well. To your point, the other people who are culpable at this is Buffon and Bonucci, who all stepped down with Gattuso, because Buffon, Bonucci, Gattuso, with Gravina they've all stepped down because they don't deserve to be there, and they've caused way too many problems for the Italian national team and the Serie A in general. All 4 of them ain't worth a fuck. All 4 of them ain't worth a fuck and shouldn't have any ties to the federation anymore, in my personal opinion, especially Buffon and Bonucci and Gravina. Them 3 could fuck off permanently for all I care. So, did you rate? Oh, Signori was class. Signori was a class player. Gianluca Signori was good. Signori. Gianluca, are you talking about Giuseppe Signori instead of Gianluca? Because Giuseppe Signori was the stud at Lazio. Gianluca Signori, I don't remember him being. Hold on. Yeah, you got to be talking about Beppe Signori, Giuseppe Signori, because Gianluca Signori, I don't know who you're referring to with that. I think you're talking about Giuseppe Signori for that. But at the end of the day, no, the Italian national team is their own worst enemy. And the problem is all these pundits, all these journalists, all these content creators ain't telling the fucking truth. They're still standing by. They want to try to see Italy do it the defensive way. It ain't going to fucking happen. We're going to just look even more ridiculous as the years go on if we continually try to do this bullshit. Because again, the thing at the end of the day that none of these guys are telling you is how deep the politics run with Italy and why that is a bigger problem than everything else. Because you got these idiots coming out and talking about, oh, release the Baggio files. Baggio tried to save Italian football. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. The problem with the Roberto Baggio files and all this shit is this. You could do everything that you want from Baggio. You could make the youth academy and everything good. The problem is at the end of the day is if the politics are still going to get in, and stop the best players from playing, then nothing's going to fucking matter. If you're only going to be picking certain players at the end of the day because of where they are, where they come from, and everywhere else, then it's not going to matter whether the Baggio files happens or not. Plain and fucking simple. Baggio could come out with them 900 pages, do everything that everybody's asking for the younger Italian talent and everything else. If shittier players are getting called to the national team because of the politics, the ongoing politics, because one kid's from the north, the other kid's from the south, this kid plays for Inter, this kid plays for Palermo or Napoli, nothing's going to fucking change. That's been Italy's biggest problem. That's the biggest talking point that none of these motherfuckers are talking about. We can say whatever we want about the Italian talent, and there's a lot of foreign players and blah, 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 and that's all fucking true. Don't get it twisted. That is all fucking true. The problem is that outside of the team that won the Euros, consistently, every other year, Italy does not send the best team because of fucking politics. Again, Gianpiero Ventura, when he was the manager of Italy, he let Buffon, Barzagli, Bonucci, and Chiellini pick the team with him so they could play that same bullshit 3-5-2 so you could have the defensive backline and goalkeeper. And guess what? It didn't fucking work. You got knocked out to Sweden. Mancini came in, told all of them to go fuck themselves. We're playing my way, which is more offensive. We won the Euros. Mancini leaves. We want to go play this defensive bullshit again. Guess what? Another fucking World Cup we missed. The World Cup that we missed with Mancini as a manager, listen, as bad as it is that we lost to Macedonia, we see those types of games all the fucking time where the better team loses 1-0. They couldn't put the goals away when they needed to, and the other team goes down one time and scores. So it is what it is when it comes to that. But the other two World Cups, it's because of this ignorance. It's because of the politics of picking certain players, and because they still think that we're in the 1990s and that the grinta, the Italian grinta and defensive capability is going to get them over the line. It ain't fucking happening. So, we're a detriment to our own selves with this shit. Why are we not saying anger and rage? Because again, Sam, them fucking greaseballs, them old greaseballs that run the federation don't give a fuck. They don't give a fuck. They are used to this political bullshit. This political bullshit's been going on since the beginning, since the fucking 60s when it comes to Italy. It's been going on since the 60s where the politics has come in to select certain players. Giacomo Bonaventura was on Milan. How does he not make the national team when you got some of these dead shit fucking midfielders that made the team? How does Giacomo Bonaventura never get a call to the national team, but that fucking bum Riccardo Montalivo does? Montalivo's a Serie B player. He was dog shit. He was shit at Fiorentina. He was shit at AC Milan. Bonaventura was a much better midfielder than him, but yet Bonaventura doesn't get a call up to the national team. Politics. It's all it comes down to is fucking politics at the end of the day. Until all the greaseballs that run the fucking politics in the Italian FA get voted out or get forced out, nothing is going to fucking change. That's why I don't understand. Oh, Conte this, Allegri that. Them motherfuckers ain't going to make no difference. They're not going to make a fucking difference. And anybody who tells you otherwise is lying to you. They're all lying to you for that. They're all lying to you for that. It's just not a situation where it's just not a situation where it's going to be that good. It's just not. And everybody needs to fucking wake up with that. Oh, Signorini. No, he was a good center back. He was a center back. He was a decent center back, but he was a decent center back at a time where there were so many good center backs in Italy. He gets forgotten about, but it's also because he wasn't up to the same level. Signorini, I mean, for me, if I had to sit here and think, I don't think Signorini makes top 15 Italian center backs, if I'm being quite honest with you. He was solid. He was a solid center back, but he ain't on that same level as some other guys. Does it sound like a European country? Yeah, but no, it does sound like a European country. I'm sorry. The old grease balls in Italy are not going to change anything because they're more worried about it affecting them getting paid. I said this before. I would not doubt that some of these old-time grease balls that are running the Italian national team are sitting there skimming money off the top that they get from the clubs that pitch in to help pay for everything at the federation, because it doesn't make sense how you can leave. Everybody saw from the game against Northern Ireland, for example, with this Italian team, that we needed some creativity in the middle. Tonali, Locatelli, and Barella were dead. They were asked to do too much defensive work, and we were going to try to play counterattack. Why are we playing counterattack against Bosnia and fucking Northern Ireland? That's why this comes down to fucking Gattuso and Bonucci and Buffon on picking the fucking team. We should not be going in. We are Italy. We got 4 stars on our fucking jersey for a reason. We should be going forward and taking it to them and attacking them. But no, the Italian way. Well, the Italian way cost you again. Yeah, Aquilani was the one. Aquilani and Montolivo, both fucking bums. Aquilani technically was a good player. Technically on the ball, he was a good player. He couldn't stay fucking healthy. But again, even he would get a call up to the national team when he didn't fucking deserve it. Again, he was on 2010. No business being on that fucking team. He had no business being on that fucking team. But again, it's the politics. Here, 2010, Marcello Lippi returns to the national team because they fired Roberto Donadoni, who was the manager for 08 Euros. Lippi, majority of the team he hires, or the majority of the team he brings, is a 7th place Juventus team. Why in God's name are you starting majority of a 7th place team on your national team when you're Italy, when there's a ton of extra players that you could have picked? Most notably, it's that Antonio Cassano was one of the big names he kicked off the team. So a bunch of guys on 7th place could make the team over him. For what? For what? So you sack him, you get Cesare Prandelli, who gets Italy to the finals in 2012. We get the shit slapped out of us by Spain. Prandelli then goes into the World Cup in 2014 and still doesn't bring some of the best players. Again, Bonaventura was left off the team, who's a much better midfielder than Riccardo Montolivo. He was better than Nocerino. He was better than Diamanti and all these other fucking bums that we were scraping the bottom of the barrel for because of politics. You know, it's the same old shit. It's the same old fucking shit. So again, the biggest problem is Italy. It's not, like I said before, yes, the discrepancies when you look at the amount of money that's invested in the South for academies in the South to try to harness the Southern talent. Again, you can look at a player like Davide Fratesi. Fratesi had to leave Rome because he wasn't good enough to break into the 22-man roster, had to leave Rome, go north as a kid, as a 16-year-old to Sassuolo, or 16 or 17, go north to Sassuolo, get promoted up through Sassuolo because Sassuolo was the only team promoting the youth at the time in Italy, and then was sold to Inter for big money. Yeah, the whole system needs to be changed, Sam. The whole system needs to be changed. One manager is not going to change. Roberto Mancini brings more change than any of the other managers because Mancini's not going to stand by that bullshit. Mancini is not going to sit by and say, we're going to do this the defensive Italian way. That's not his way. Mancini will play open attacking football like we saw in the Euros. The thing for me is it's not only Mancini. For me, Malago is the better guy, but obviously now we're starting to see that he's just as bad as Abete, is the other guy who's up for the election, because both of them are already starting to show signs that we're going to revert to type and nothing's going to fucking change. So for me, if you want to see serious change, the new top four for me, for Italy, should be Malago as the president, the assistant, the vice president, who's going to be there running the show with him, should be Paolo Maldini, since AC Milan, for whatever reason, is not calling Paolo Maldini to come back to the fold. You should put Paolo Maldini on the national team to help run it. Then, for me, Roberto Mancini is the manager. And then you should give a job to Maurizio Sarri to be the head of development, because Sarri is the manager who has been speaking louder than anybody about the changes that need to take place in Italy, about the fundamental changes of making the players better, of investing in the youth, harnessing a lot of the talent that you see that gets neglected in the South, where there's so much more talent down there that's not being used because they don't have the money to afford to move their entire lifestyle out of Southern Italy into the North to go to the better academies. The entire system from top to bottom has to be ripped out and started over again. There's no way that you can keep trying to do the same thing over and over again and get the shit results and then expect that something magically is going to happen to where you're going to be okay. No, he wouldn't be good for Italy because, again, Conte is going to do the same thing. Conte will come in here. He'll say, I'm going to play the defensive 3-5-2 that's cost us 2 World Cup appearances, and the best players won't get a call-up because Conte won't do that either. Conte's European team in 2016, he didn't take the best team. He left players off. He took certain players because he knew he would get something out of them to believe in that defensive mentality bullshit, because Conte is the same thing. He's an old relic. He is a relic of the Italian past that wants to play that defensive-minded Catenaccio. I'm sorry, it ain't working on a national team level. It just ain't fucking working. You need to be able to have more attacking prowess with the team. I just don't understand it. Conte cannot be the new hire for the national team. If Conte gets hired for the national team, then here's the problem. You need to take all the best players from Italy for the Euros in 2028, and you have to win. If you don't win the Euros and you take Conte, it was a failed 2 years, because we're not going to be giving any of the young kids the opportunity at the national team unless you force it down Conte's throat, which for me ain't going to fucking happen, because we're going to see the same thing revert to type. Somebody is going to get into Conte's ear. Oh, you need to take another player from Inter or Milan or Juve, even though they may not have the best players for Italy. They're going to look at those teams because those 3 teams contribute the most money into the federation. And other players are going to be left out. Again, we left Orsolini, we left Orsolini, we left Berardi, we left Pellegrini. We left 3 guys that could create, guys that can create better goal-scoring opportunities than the fucking likes of the bum Politano, or a gassed-out, tired DiMarco, or a Palestra who's a youngster, or a Coyote. I know he's the one that everybody likes to talk about. No, I don't want to see this 3-5-2 shit. I don't want to see another back line of 3 for Italy. I want to see this team playing either 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1, playing a more attacking-minded formation, because our better players for the team are in attack, and we need to go forward with the times. 1990 Serie A ain't coming back no time soon just because you play 3-5-2 for the national team. It ain't going to make a fucking difference. So if this team doesn't get their shit in order, if they don't get their shit straight, it's not going to change anytime soon, and it's not going to change for the better. It's going to continue to get worse. It's going to continue to get worse. That's why you need to make the jump now and take a chance and say, listen, Sarri, you're coming to the national team. You're coming to the national team. We want you to be the head of scout. We've seen what you've been able to do at Napoli and at Lazio, overachieving with a limited squad and limited funds that he had at those 2 teams. And we want you to be the main guy to lead the direction of developing the youngsters, because despite what everybody likes to say about Sarri, he plays a more open attacking game than a lot of Italian managers, but his defending is still very, very good. His defending is still very, very good. We've seen this at Lazio. We've seen this at Napoli. We saw it at Juve for the 1 year. Yes, the one season that everybody knows Sarri for the most is because he was in the Premier League, because the most eyes are on the Premier League, and everybody thought, oh, his defense was shit. But you had the likes of fucking David Luiz and Christensen as your two center backs. What did you expect when Rudiger was hurt? So, and Azpilicueta can't play a center back in a back line of four. So at the end of the day, Sarri, for me, with the development, I think Sarri should be the head of development for the Italian national team for the foreseeable future. Same with, like I said, Paolo Maldini should be the vice president behind Malago to make sure that Malago stays in fucking line and stays in check, and we don't go down the same old greaseball bullshit of, oh, changes need to happen. 6 months down the line, dust it under the rug, business as usual, and nothing changes. No, we can't do that shit no more. We can't afford to do it no more. I appreciate that, Dave. I appreciate that. Appreciate you stopping by, my guy. Appreciate it. But yeah, that's, for me, that's what we got to look at with this national team. I don't think Conte should even be looked at. I don't think Allegri should even be looked at. Because Allegri's not, if Allegri would go back to what he did the first 2 seasons at Juventus when they were playing some decent football going forward, but were solid defensively, I could kind of hear it. The problem is Allegri's going to do the same thing. He's going to show up with the 3-5-2. We're going to have politics of who's going to be in the middle, who's going to be a creative player, and all this bullshit. It's going to be the same thing. Same thing if you get Conte. Like I said, Mancini is the only guy I'm looking at. Mancini is the only manager that I'm looking at to take over the team. For me, I could potentially, if Mancini doesn't come, then I would say Sarri needs to be the manager, and Paolo Maldini, then the only 3 managers that I would consider for the national team is either Mancini, Vincenzo Montella, because he's done a tremendous job with the Turkish national team and was done wronged he got dealt a bad hand and was done dirty by the Italian media with what happened with it. But I would say Montella, Sarri, or Mancini would be the only 3 guys I'm looking at for the national team manager. Other than that, I'm not looking at none of these other guys. I don't want nobody to come in that's going to say, oh, we need to do the old Italian way, because it ain't going to fucking work. And it's going to bite us in the ass again. Italy looks to lack talent. Is that the case? No. Italy looks like they lack talent because you don't take the best team to the competitions at all. That's the problem. That's the reason why. That's the reason why I don't want. That's the reason why the wholesale changes need to happen. There's plenty of talented players that didn't get a call up to the national team for whatever reason. I mean, hell, Zaniolo's been balling out for Udinese. You don't give Zaniolo a call up, who's a youngster who will still be around for the next cycle, who, if he resurrects his career as he's slowly been doing at Udinese, I would happily take Zaniolo back on the national team. You don't take Pellegrini. You don't take Lorenzo Pellegrini, who's the captain of Rome, a creative midfielder. You don't take him when creativity is the biggest creativity and goal scoring is the biggest problem for the Italian national team. You don't take him. Domenico Berardi, if it wasn't for his injury and Sassuolo getting sent down to Serie B, Domenico Berardi is one of the top 3 goal scorers in Italy of the last decade. And you don't take him for whatever reason. The guy, when you look at it, Domenico Berardi has scored 129 goals in his career at the top level in Serie A. Okay? Dybala has only scored 2 more than him. The only other player in the last decade in the Serie A that has scored more goals than Domenico Berardi is Ciro Immobile. That's it. Berardi, when you look at overall, for those that like the GA merchants, Domenico Berardi has nearly 180 GA over the last 10 years in the Serie A playing for Sassuolo. With probably 2 out of the 10 years in total. If you add up all the injuries, he's probably only played in 8 of the 10 years, and he's got that many goals and assists for a team like Sassuolo. But magically, he doesn't get a call up to the national team because for some reason, Gennaro Gattuso thinks Politano is better than him. I'm sorry, no. You left so many creative players and better attacking players home than what he brought with because, again, Gattuso, Bonucci, and Buffon all said, we need to do this the Italian way. We need to do this the defensive way, and we're going to do it. No. This is the reason why when people say, oh, there's a lack of talent. There's not a lack of talent. The best players aren't getting called to the national team. It is 3 World Cups in a row now, T-Dot. But the problem is, again, if the same shit's going to keep happening, nothing's going to fucking change. Again, everybody in Italy, if they truly know what's been going on and how the politics and everything works, we've seen this coming for 16 years. The first sign of this was 2000. The first sign of this was 2010 at the World Cup. That was the first sign. Even 2006, even though we won the World Cup, there were still signs that this was coming down the pipe because even 2006 wasn't the best set of players that we could have took. We still left off a decent amount of good players that we could have pushed onto that team. But it worked out and we won. However, you go 4 years later, you take the 2010, again, Juventus finished 7th. Why is that the majority of the team for 2010? Pazzini doesn't get an opportunity when Pazzini was lighting Serie A up with Sampdoria. Cassano doesn't get a call up to that team. Quagliarella was the best fucking team. Quagliarella was the best fucking player for the team, and he only played 20-something minutes. Di Natale barely played. Again, so if you're not going to give the best players the opportunities they deserve on the team, you're not going to go anywhere. 2012 Euro was not a good team. Again, Bonaventura, better than Riccardo Montalivo. Montalivo was dog shit. Nocerino, dog shit. We got lucky that we were cohesive enough to play in that 3-5-2 for that team, and the breakout of Mario Balotelli on the international squad got there. That team wasn't that fucking good. That team wasn't that fucking good. You got the likes of Federico Balzaretti as a starter on Italy? The fuck out of here. Balzaretti wasn't that good. I mean, look at that period. Balzaretti, Abate, Di Sciglio. That's your wingbacks? Your midfield is Marchisio, Pirlo, and De Rossi? Or you drop Marchisio to start Montalivo? No, bro. That team was not that fucking good. It was the politics. We got lucky. We got lucky that we had the back line of Juventus in their prime in 2012, and that Balotelli was a very good striker, and that Cassano was on his last legs of being a very good creator for 2012 to get where they were. Besides that, that team was mid at best. That team for an Italy team is mid at best, because then you turn right around. There ain't no change when you go to the 2014 World Cup and Costa Rica and Uruguay knock you out. Brother, England was a shit team. England didn't have a good team in 2012. What are we doing here? England's prime was 2010. Them 2 years in between, England fell off the map. They weren't that fucking good. Again, within 5 minutes, De Rossi almost put us up 1-0 from the halfway line. Joe Hart looked scared as shit in that fucking game. England wasn't that good in 2012. Let's be honest here. That Italian team is not that good. We didn't win the tournament in 2012, brother. What are you talking about? We lost to Spain. If you're talking about the Euro final when we beat England, yes, we went there with the best team. That's the difference. The only time in this period where we have selected the best team for the Italian national team based on the players available that are not hurt without any politics was the Euros, and we won. That's the difference. That's the difference. That was the 2021 Euros. It was supposed to be 2020, but the pandemic pushed it back a year. But at the end of the day, that's the only team. And again, that's why I want Mancini as the manager, because Mancini went to the FA and told everybody that you can go fuck yourself. We're not going to play this defensive bullshit anymore. We're going to play a more forward-thinking brand of football and go play a 4-3-3. And we ended up winning the fucking Euros because of it. But again, as soon as Mancini was gone, they reverted back to type. They said, we're doing it the Italian defensive way, and we fucked ourselves again. That's the and then here, look at the Euros with Spalletti. Spalletti got forced to pick some of them players. Fagioli should have never been on that fucking team. Again, Fagioli should have never been on that team. You don't start Zaccagni. You went with the 3-5-2 again in the Euros there. You don't start Zaccagni, yet Zaccagni is the best left winger in Italy since Insigne left, and his last-second goal against Croatia gets you into the knockout rounds. What are we doing here? You even got decent players that are better than your starting rotation. You still won't start them because of the politics. Again, that's the problem, brother. Until the politics and the bullshit that this FA has shoved down everybody's throat to get used to, the nonsense and the bullshit that comes with being a fan of the Italian national team, if you really look into it, until they change the politics, Italy is not going to change, bro. If Italy doesn't change the politics and doesn't change shit within the next 2 years, if there's not a significant change to who's in the FA, who the president is, and who's running the show, Italy's bound to miss maybe 2 more straight World Cups because of this bullshit. Again, it's not that we lack talent. We have decent, good young players. The problem is, are the good young players even going to make the team? Are they even going to make the team because of the politics? That's the problem at the end of the day. Again. And not only are they going to make the team because of politics, are you even going to allow the top talent to play proper on the national team? Again, a 3-5-2. The fuck are we still doing trying to play this defensive shit? And then you got guys fighting over players that haven't done it at the big level. You're talking about Coyote at Brentford to make the Italian national team. Are we fucking nuts? That's the levels that we're stupid to try to defend this bullshit? Again, that's what it is at the end of the day, man. So for me, the Italian national team, like I said before, if there ain't no major changes coming to the national team, if the FA is not going to get rid of some of these fucking bums that continue to cause us problems and do the national team harm, then nothing's going to change. And it's already starting to show that. Again, Malago, as soon as he was talked about being the front runner to be the president, Mancini. Once the dust settled and the politics really started to kick back in again, immediately we go to a defensive-minded manager to try to do the 1990s Italy thing again with Conte or Allegri. Again, it doesn't fucking end. It's the same old shit, left, right, and center. It's not going to change unless there's wholesale changes to be made. And if there's not going to be wholesale changes, we could realistically be talking about Italy missing 4 or 5 straight World Cups rather than 3. Because we can produce talent. We'll still be able to produce a decent amount of talent where you would still think that Italy has 11 to 17 players good enough to qualify for the World Cup. But the problem is if you don't take your best players and don't put the best product out there, nothing's going to fucking change. And that's the bigger problem for Italy rather than putting out talent. So again, at the end of the day, it is what it is. It is what it fucking is. If the grease balls don't want to change, if they want to still, there's an old saying that people trip over dollars to bitch about nickels. And that's what these older head Italians are doing. They're worried about the money that they're skimming from the FA. They're worried about the money that they get paid under the table from the bigger teams to get some of their players up to the national team and all this other bullshit that goes involved with it. That's all the horse shit that goes on with the Italian FA. And unless that stuff is brought to an end, nothing's going to fucking change. And Italy's going to be set to do the same old nonsensical bullshit we always do. So at the end of the day, it is what it is. And you know what, man? I'll be honest with you. I'm starting to get to the point where I could give a shit about the Italian national team because as long as the politics continue to be there, I don't really care about the team. I sent Shane Gooner when Gattuso sent out his picks for the team that he put forward, right? I sent it to Shane, and immediately afterwards I said the politics are kicking in. The best players weren't called up, right? Gattuso chose 4 goalkeepers. The fuck you need 4 goalkeepers for 2 qualifying games? You really think 3 goalies are going to get hurt playing Northern Ireland and Bosnia? Like, what the fuck are we doing here? You chose 4 goalkeepers while you left Berardi, Pellegrini, and Orsolini at home. You left 3 creators and goal scorers at home because you needed 4 goalies. What the fuck else do we need to talk about here? All these idiots, all these fucking idiots Like I said before, all them idiots at Paramount Plus, all them idiots that are Italian content creators that are all talking about, oh, the 3-5-2. You had guys talking about, oh, but judging by this lineup and this selection, Gattuso's going to go with the back line of 5, which I have no problem with it. Really? You have no problem with a back line of 5 when Italy's biggest problem is scoring goals and creativity. You don't have a problem with it. Well, you got what you deserve. You got what you fucking deserve. Because again, these guys will not call it out because they're getting paid under the table as well. They're getting paid under the table as well. And if they're not getting paid directly, they're getting comped one way or another. They're getting comped to either go to games. You got guys on CBS that are getting flown out to Italy every other weekend to go look at a match day. These are the same guys that said, oh, I have no problem with this team that Gattuso selected. Well, there you go. There you go. It's the same thing with what you hear from the PR with Arsenal. When you got all these people who just blindly go along and support the team no matter what the fuck happens, even if it's bad, they'll go blindly support the team. It's the same thing that's going on with Italy. Same thing that's going on with Italy. Needed to hawk that loogie. Sorry about that. But it's the same thing going on with Italy at the end of the day. There's no change. There's no difference. There's no fucking difference. Again, the 3-5-2, if you look at, I'm trying to remember that kid's name. He's a Juventus fan. But he just did an interview with Baggio, this kid. And he was trying to talk about the files and, oh, Baggio would save Italy and all that. Brother, him and Baggio are both part of the problem. You know why? Baggio can do whatever he wants for this Italian national team. It's not going to make a difference if the best players are not being selected by the fucking team. That's the end of the story no matter what. You could revolutionize to where Italy's putting quality talent out left, right, and center like it was in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. If the best players are not going to make the national team because of political bullshit, it's not going to make a fucking difference of what happens. And that's the story at the end of the day. Okay? Anybody who sits here and tells you that Roberto Baggio tried to save Italian football is lying to you. They're lying to you. Or they're just hopping on the bandwagon of what these other fucking morons are saying because they're not smart enough or intelligent enough to actually pick up this or pick up a computer and actually do some research and some fucking reading. Because if you did your research and some fucking reading, or if you did research all the quality players that were in Italy and then look at who got selected for the national teams at all the different international games, you would then start scratching your head and say, well, wait a minute. Why are you missing anywhere from 4 to maybe even 7 players that are better than what you're going to the national team with? And once people start looking into that, that's what's going to tell the story. The problem is the majority of these content creators and majority of these people in the media, like that Italian stupid fuck journalist that went on TalkSport talking about how great it would be to get Conte or Allegri to the national team. Again, you're not promoting anything. A week ago, you were talking about how great it is that Gravina's stepping down. Next, but the following week, Milagros talking about bringing back Conte, who's going to play the exact same formation and mentality way that Gattuso was. And now all of a sudden, oh, everything's bad. Everything's good. We're going to go back to the Italian way again. That's failed us for the last 16 years overall. But we're going to go back to it because he needs to protect his investment of being a journalist of the Italian national team. That's what it is at the end of the day. He don't give a fuck about that national team. As much as he says he does, he don't give a fuck. He don't give a fuck that, like I said, that the Juventus kid that does content and everything else, he don't give a fuck about the national team. He doesn't. Because he is one of the main people that's got a big backing that's for all this bullshit. He's not for any change. Again, he's one of the guys, 5 defenders, no problem. Well, you got what you were asking for, right? But immediately, everyone said that they backed the 5-man backline for Gattuso. Oh, we're going to do it the Italian way. 24 hours later, all these motherfuckers got their fucking panties in a knot up their ass and are bitching, I can't believe we lost. Why? It's the same old shit. It's been rinse and repeat. So it is what it is at the end of the day. And you know what, man? The Italian national team's got nobody to blame but themselves. And until the Italian people, the Italian public, the other people in the Serie A that are down with the bullshit and are going to stand 10 toes down on making sure that the necessary changes to this FA happen, then we're just going to be doing the same old shit. And nobody should be really getting that upset about it anymore. Because, again, we're just accepting mediocrity and we're just going to go with the flow and not change and take our own destiny in our own hands. So it is what it is at the end of the day. Big up to RSV. Conte's Juventus looked a lot better as they were more entertaining and direct compared to Allegri's Juve side. I could hear that. I could hear that to a certain degree. I thought Quagliarella and Vucinic were definitely a striker pairing that I liked the most out of that Juventus run. I thought that definitely had something to do with it. Obviously, Marchisio and the rest of the boys that were there at the time with Conte at Juve, they were a very solid team. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and say that they were entertaining or anything because I'm not going to give anything positive to Juve. That team could go fuck themselves till the end of time. So, not Forza Napoli sempre. I'm never going to fucking root for Juventus at the end of the day. But Conte's Juve was decent. I think the problem is when you compare Conte to Allegri is Allegri was able to get more out of them than what Conte did, especially when you look at them coming back and winning the 2017-2018 Scudetto when us and Juve both went over 90 points for first and second place, which has never happened before in Italy. Napoli has the highest amount of point totals for a second place team that year under Maurizio Sarri. And, the way for us to finish with 91 points and then Juve won the league. Juve won the league with 95. I mean, that team was unbelievable, that Juventus team to come back from what happened. But, for me, I think Allegri's team is overall better, although I do have a soft spot for Mirko Vucinic and Quagliarella because they were both class players for me. But yeah, want to big up everybody in the channel that stopped by for the conversation today. John Boy, AJ, Quaja, RSV, Sam, all the guys that put in chats and everything else. I appreciate everybody for stopping by for the conversation today. We're going to call it a night. I've been working a crazy schedule as far as night work, so I'm not able to stream as long as I have been for some of these other streams. I will be back tomorrow. With a call-in show. We will do a pre-Bournemouth call-in show. We'll have the show after the West. I believe it's West Ham who's playing tomorrow. I think it's West Ham and Wolves. We will do it after the West Ham and Wolves game. Appreciate everybody who stopped by for the conversation. And I hope everybody has a blessed night. We will see you tomorrow for on Terrence's channel as well, BBK Sports. We will be doing the Around the League show, and I'll try to see if I can do that call-in show before. If not, we'll definitely do a call-in show Saturday. But big up to everybody that stopped by for the conversation. Hope everybody has a blessed evening, and we are out.